It all comes down to this. After 7 months of grueling play on the gridiron, we're down to 2. Welcome to Super Bowl 58, where the Kansas City Chiefs take on the San Francisco 49ers, a rematch of Super Bowl 54. The Shanahan versus Reed rivalry continues, and this time it's going to look a bit different compared to the last time they played. And it's led us to believe that this could end up being a pretty darn good game, where we don't know for certain who's actually going to win it. So today, I'm going to give you, in my opinion, what I think is going to happen in this game, with a preview and prediction of Super Bowl 58. Let's see how these teams match up, as well as their strengths and weaknesses, and the keys to either side winning this game. Let's start with the 49ers. So first things first, the big thing that jumps out as the advantage for San Francisco that most fans will point out is they generally have the better overall team. From top to bottom, they're deeper, and it goes without question. But the big thing that blows this wide open for San Fran is going to be their skill position players. They destroy Kansas City in that aspect. It's kind of crazy. You've got arguably the best tackle in football and Trent Williams leading the way. You have the best running back in the game in Christian McCaffrey. And then, while George Kittle is no Travis Kelce, he is around that level when he's having a good game. So no worries there. And then there's the wide receiver position, right? Just comparatively, there's so much more depth and talent with San Francisco when they're healthy. Between Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, it's a lot to deal with. And overall, it gives the Niners a more potent, more explosive pass game. They are a lot more likely to rip off the big plays than the Kansas City Chiefs, based off of what we've seen from both teams this season, and just the reputation that these receivers have. And in the Super Bowl, in a high-pressure environment like this, sometimes that one big play can seriously make the difference. But also, just to reiterate a point I made before, they've got Christian McCaffrey. I said before he's the best running back in football, and that makes a huge difference, obviously, but it goes so beyond that, just in terms of what he can contribute to this Niners team. They are very young, they have an inexperienced quarterback, and someone like McCaffrey can help ease the nerves early on by getting a couple easy completions out of the backfield that could still go for big gains because of his speed and his athleticism, or maybe you can open up a big hole or two early on, get him a couple of big chunk run plays, and again, that'll help open up the pass game and get you more loose and more confident as a team. The skill set and his ability to do so many different things is huge. McCaffrey is the type of guy they needed the last time they were in the Super Bowl against Kansas City. They didn't have that type of explosive run game, that superstar level player. They had a younger Mostert, but they didn't get a lot of yards out of him. It was like 50-something on the day. And as a result, when that game was coming down to crunch time, when they were trying to hang on to their lead, they had to depend more so on Jimmy G to get the job done, and he just couldn't do it. The nerves got to him, and his lack of skill was starting to show. Now, of course, Brock Purdy's a better player than Jimmy G, but the principle remains the same. The 49ers offense is just legit. They're going to wear you down over time no matter how good you are, and they're capable of putting up so many points. Going from Jimmy G to Brock Purdy has made such a big difference. In my opinion, Purdy still has something to prove, but at the end of the day, he still is getting the job done, and he's been clutch when his team needed him to late in games in these last two playoff matches against Green Bay and Detroit, respectively. That's something the Niners were never able to do beforehand in the Shanahan era. Whenever they were trailing, they'd just fold over and lose. It was always about having a lead and then being more comfortable that way, but it seems like they're starting to figure something out. They're starting to become a more mentally and physically resilient group, and that's huge, especially in a Super Bowl game against a group of vets like the Kansas City Chiefs. Being able to play comfortably and not lose who you are and rush things and force things is so big, and I think the Niners are starting to show us that. They are starting to blossom at the literal perfect time going into a huge Super Bowl game like this. I love where this 49ers offense is at, and I'm excited to see what they can do against a tough Kansas City defense. However, this Niners team is far from perfect. It's something you have to keep in the back of your mind, and I think it all starts with the defense. Specifically, they seem to have these cold starts to matches. We saw it both in the Green Bay and Detroit games where they were giving up some touchdowns early on to have that deficit grow and make the lives of their offense teammates a bit harder. Specifically in that Detroit game, they were getting gashed. I mean, they could do whatever they wanted. They could pass the ball, they could run the ball, and ultimately they put up over 20 in that first half, and it really seemed like things were bleak for San Francisco. The only good news is that they've shown they can clutch up late in games, holding Green Bay and Detroit to very little points in the second halves of those games, which is something that kind of redeems them a little bit. It is helpful. But getting off to a slow start against Kansas City, allowing them to get off hot early on, sounds like a recipe for disaster. As the difference between a Kansas City and a Detroit and Green Bay is that level of experience. A team like Green Bay or Detroit, it's their first time in the playoffs under this new era. Finally, Goff and the Lions get there after a couple years. Jordan Love in his first year as a starter gets there. There's a big difference between that and playing Patrick Mahomes, who has been shredding defenses here in the playoffs. Not to mention a guy who has already won 2 Super Bowls, who's been to 3. This is something he has done in his sleep. It's as natural as breathing. And if you let him get off to a good start and give his team a lead, he's not going to look back. The Niners defense needs to figure out a way to have those clutch stops happen earlier in the game so this one doesn't get too out of hand. It is so crucial for them to not fall behind early. They've got to play the best football of the year right here, right now. And just based off of what I've seen the last couple of weeks, I don't know if they can do it. That is a question they need to answer. Additionally, there's a couple things on the mental side that I'm a bit worried about with this Niners team. One is going to be how Brock Purdy performs. Again, I respect how he's done in these playoffs, and it seems like there's reason to have confidence in him, but still, he is a young player, his second season in the league as a starter, a 7th rounder, playing up against Patrick Mahomes, who could be a future GOAT in the making. That's going to be tough to keep up with, having that same mental resiliency, not letting the pressure get to you. And you have to think about their coaching situation. As good as Shanahan is, he is kind of known as a choker. Just going back to the losses in the NFC Championship games and the Super Bowls, I believe he was on Atlanta when they choked to New England as well. He just has a long history of that. And that kind of scares me. It seems like a stupid thing to think about just because, you know, it's a new game, new day, new era. But stuff like this has often mattered when you look at the history of football, hence why I bring it up, and it's why it's something that I'm a bit worried about compared to Coach Reid, who has already won multiple Super Bowls and has been in a lot. When you look at it, the Niners are definitely the better team as a whole. They have a lot of advantages, but they've got some serious questions to answer with how their young quarterback can do and how they hold up in the coaching battle, and if their defense can turn it around amongst a couple of other things. I like to believe that overall they should be favored, just knowing the skill sets that they have, but nothing's guaranteed in the NFL. It's one game, and things that should happen on paper often don't. Now let's turn it over to their opponents, the Kansas City Chiefs. They have had a pretty interesting year. For a long time, it seemed like this team would not be in contention to make it to the Super Bowl. A playoff team, yeah, but to make it to the big championship game with how bad the receivers were and with Mahomes having a down year? No, definitely not. But here they are anyway, through the storm, making it through, playing as good as you could possibly ask for when it mattered. This Chiefs team was able to win all of their playoff games convincingly, and they have shown some big-time strong points, and have made it almost seem like they were just waiting for this moment to truly unleash themselves, as they look like a completely different beast. They're evolving over time and just playing so well. Let's break it all down. The first big thing that everyone points out with Kansas City is, of course, the defense, and for good reason. This Kansas City defensive unit led by Coach Steve Spagnuolo has been absolutely incredible. They've got a mean pass rush, they've got good run-stopping ability, and they have an amazing secondary full of young studs. Just from top to bottom, they have 11 men who play their hearts out on defense. If you look at the numbers, I mean, they're fantastic. Here in the playoffs, they've given up the least number of yards per game. I believe they were top 3 or 4 with total yards this season, and they had the second most sacks, only behind Baltimore. Those guys know what they're doing. This is a very threatening group, and it's very easily the best defense we've seen in the Pat Mahomes Kansas City era. And they're led by a coaching mastermind in Steve Spagnuolo. I am a big fan of Spags as a Giants fan. I have nothing but the utmost respect for this guy. He has devised some masterful game plans in the playoffs and in the Super Bowl in years past. He's a multi-time Super Bowl winning defensive coordinator, and I would trust him with my life to come up with that one big stop, or even to dominate. I mean, we've seen him destroy better offenses, better quarterbacks than Brock Purdy in the San Francisco 49ers. I could definitely see him doing the same to this group, if not containing them or making that one big play like we saw last year against Philadelphia. But where else can KC press the advantage? Well, I mean, first and foremost, quarterback. No duh. They've got Patrick Mahomes, the best quarterback on the planet. That's certainly a good start. As much as I've loved Purdy in these playoffs, Patrick Mahomes is a different breed. He is locked in big time here in the postseason and has managed the game perfectly with some beautiful throws, and he just lives and breathes playoff football. It's his 4th Super Bowl already. He's never done worse than the AFC Championship in his career. He is meant to be in the spotlight, and that just gives you such a big sense of confidence in him. The fact that he's done this so many times before, and that he can still do it many more times in the future. He's got the arm talent, the accuracy, and most importantly, the football mind. That's something that I think goes under the radar sometimes because he's a flashy player who makes these incredible throws. Patrick Mahomes is a brilliant football mind, and he's constantly evolving and getting better and smarter. That adaptability is something that he needs to be praised for. Since kind of transitioning with their offense and having different weapons and Travis Kelce getting a bit older, they've been focusing more so on ripping off little plays at a time and marching their way up the field and dominating in time of possession and exhausting the enemy defense. The fact is, the Chiefs' offense has evolved into something more methodical, and it's demoralizing and exhausting for defenses to deal with. We've seen it here in these playoffs, especially when they're doing it right off the rip, like first, second drive of the game. That sets the tone early on and gets rid of a lot of possession time. So now if you're the other team, you're having even less time than you usually would to try and get the ball downfield and tie up the game, and you're dealing with a dangerous defense, which just puts you in this cycle of absolute misery, where you can't move the ball downfield, and Mahomes is picking you apart. No matter what you do, you can get it to a 3rd down, and then he brings out the improbable nonsense again and makes a ridiculous play. He just doesn't stop. It is so hard to take down a Chiefs team that plays this way, that plays this smart, and has the dominance on defense. And what makes it so hard ultimately, aside from Mahomes being a smarter player, is the fact that they have a more balanced approach to their game, and they're efficient both with the pass and the run game. If anyone knows Coach Reed, even during his Philly days, he was never fond of running the football. That's just never been the coach he has been. But suddenly with Isaiah Pacheco, they've adapted and they've been utilizing him a lot, and he's been having some pretty big games. We've seen it. And he is exhausting to keep up with. He can wear and tear at a defense, and when it comes to the goal line, he's almost a guaranteed touchdown with how aggressive he runs. This guy is an easy way to punch it in and get some points. The Chiefs' red zone offense may be more dangerous than it's ever been before thanks to this guy. And you know, I didn't even mention the offensive line. Kansas City's O-line play has significantly improved as the season has gone along, and it feels like they've been quite dominant, be it through the pass or the run blocking here in the playoffs. Mahomes has been on his feet a lot. It has made his life a lot easier to make those big throws. So between all of those things, the Chiefs have all the measures to have a very balanced approach, dominate on both sides of the ball, and make it so the other team never even has a chance, catching them in an endless loop. Does this mean Kansas City is unbeatable though? Well, definitely not. They're good in a lot of areas. I like how their game has evolved this year, but let's not forget part of the reason they were in a mess to begin with this year and why people were so down on them. Those skill position players need to continue to be doubted. They've played a lot better here in the playoffs, but you never know when they could slip up again. Not having Kadarius Toney out there definitely helps, but outside of Rashee Rice, a lot of those wide receivers aren't exactly the most reliable. We've seen MVS drop passes, even though he's played better recently. Who was it? Mecole Hardman had a couple of fumbles in that Buffalo game. We've seen how one mistake can be the difference between losing and winning a Super Bowl in a lot of the recent games throughout the years. Like, seriously, the Chiefs are one miscue away, one drop away, one looking downfield before securing the ball away from just straight up losing the game to San Francisco. The Niners are a really good team, so one mistake could be all it takes. It's true that the same thing applies to the 49ers, but again, Think about the skill position players. Think about who is more likely to have a terrible mistake happen at the worst time possible. It goes to Kansas City. We've already seen this story before. A bunch of times in the regular season that has led to their demise. And that's not even where it ends. That's not even my only concern. Again, while the Chiefs can make some big throws happen here and there, some big first downs in the clutch on like a 3rd and long, they haven't exactly been the most explosive with their passing game this year. And if the Chiefs find themselves playing from behind late in the game and they need a big play to happen, that could be a major problem. Again, I know it hasn't been a problem recently. Maybe they'll be fine, but something to keep in the back of your mind based off of their history. I don't like their hands. I don't like the lack of chunk plays. And also sometimes their defense is susceptible to giving up a big play here and there, like we just saw last week in the Baltimore game. Their offense was struggling for most of that match, but they found a wide open Zay Flowers a bunch of times. And we were dealing with both Debo and Ayuk. We could see more of that happen. And again, one big play could be all it takes for the Chiefs to fall behind and not be able to come back. When you look at both teams, you got things that you like and dislike about them. Definitely more likes overall for both of them, and I think because of that, they're probably going to end up playing a very close game. I highly doubt this Super Bowl is going to be a blowout in favor of one side or the other. Definitely possible, especially with Kansas City's defense, but it just doesn't give off that vibe, knowing how this type of year has been. I could genuinely see this game going either way, but in the end, I believe that the Kansas City Chiefs will win and hoist up the Lombardi Trophy for the 2nd season in a row, the first repeat champion since the Patriots. I doubted them for a couple of weeks here in the playoffs, but I'm done. They've continuously proved themselves against some of the best. Their game has evolved into a way that I really like, and I don't think that the 49ers are going to stop them. Now, I do believe this game is going to be higher scoring than some people expect. I don't know what it is, but I went with Kansas City winning by a score of 31-27. I just see the Niners putting up more points than the likes of Buffalo or Miami or, of course, Baltimore. Their offense is just more reliable and more explosive, and I think the game's going to break down at some point. It's the Super Bowl. It's exhausting. Mistakes are going to be made, but it's going to be the Chiefs that come out on top for 2 reasons. One is the difference in defense. I do think the game will be high scoring, but the Chiefs are going to be more likely to get some critical punts or make that big stop on the final drive of the game. They may not have a lot of the big stars like you'd see on other teams, but it's just a reliable group that play well together, and I think they can control the tempo enough to keep the 49ers from breaking too loose. But then on the other side of it, the 49ers defense has been as inconsistent as ever, getting big stops when they need to, but also getting completely and utterly gashed in the process. You think about how bad they were against the run and how Montgomery and Gibbs and Aaron Jones could do whatever the heck they wanted for a lot of those respective matchups, and then you start to worry about what Isaiah Pacheco could do to those guys over the course of a game. Combine Pacheco's bruiser-like, slow burn mentality of running hard at you, getting those chunk plays, even getting a red zone TD or two, with Pat Mahomes' clutch ability to find first down after first down, and you'll have an exhausted defense and an offense that is consistently being held off the field or not scoring the big touchdowns that you'd like because the Chiefs' defense is elite. It's going to be hard for the Niners to break out of this cycle, and as the more inexperienced team, I don't know if they can do it. And that gets me into explanation number 2, why the Niners will fall short. The experience difference. Throughout these playoffs, we've seen the more experienced teams come through time after time. When the lights are bright like this, who are you going to trust more to win this game? Brock Purdy's been good, but compared to Mahomes' career so far, he still has a lot to do. He's more likely to miss a throw, make a big mistake, throw a pick, and lose his team the game. As much as I respect this kid, and I think he could be a good franchise QB for years to come, I'm going to trust Mahomes 9 times out of 10 with him. But that's not even where it ends. It goes beyond the quarterback position. It's kind of just a team thing in general. This Niners team has a lot of vets that have been in this situation before, yes, but compared to a Chiefs team that has already won multiple times, there's kind of a difference there. There's some layers to it. And going off of the theme of this season, it seems that the more experienced teams usually are the ones to execute better and stay level-headed. Like in that Baltimore game, They stood out of their own way, they made the big plays, and they let the Ravens implode on themselves. The same thing could happen in the San Francisco game, to a lesser degree, but it could still be present. And if we're going off of that theme and how things have gone this year, you just got to give it to Kansas City. I'm expecting a hard-fought game until the very end, regardless of the outcome, but I gotta give this one to the Kansas City Chiefs. It just feels like it's their year, man, with how everything has gone, all the adversity they've gotten through, with how confident they look, that joy of playing as underdogs and being doubted. It gives them energy. The way they've played on both sides of the ball looks great. They have the better quarterback, better experience, better coaching. I just got to give the slight edge to the Chiefs. Talent-wise, the Niners have it, but I don't think that's going to be enough to win this game, especially when the Niners and Shanahan are kind of more so known as chokers. So give me the more experienced team that knows what they're doing every single day of the week. But maybe you think differently. Let me know what you think about what's going to happen in this Super Bowl matchup down in the comments below. Do you think the Niners are going to take it, or do you think the Kansas City Chiefs will walk away with yet another ring in the Pat Mahomes era? And of course, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe for more NFL content every single week.